Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. The following is intended solely for educational and entertainment purposes. This is the verbatim federal courtroom testimony of Paris Hilton really said in court about Sean Diddy Combs, as told by Inner City Press. The whole courtroom got super quiet when she walked in. Not just quiet, totally silent. The kind of quiet when everyone forgets how to breathe. People turned their heads and stared. Even the judge stopped talking mid-sentence. You could hear her fancy black jacket moving and her high heels clicking on the shiny wood floor. It felt like a movie scene, but it wasn't fake. Paris Hilton wasn't there to put on a show. She stopped right by the witness chair and looked like she might turn around and leave. But she didn't. Instead, she looked up just once at the guy being charged, then slowly sat down in the chair. The quiet lasted way too long before the court officer spoke up. "Say your name for the record." "Paris Whitney Hilton." Her voice was calm and clear, but there was something different about it. A seriousness that wasn't there back in the early 2000s when she was on magazine covers and at fancy parties. She looked older, yes, but smarter too. Not in obvious ways. She still had some of that glamour and shine, but her eyes looked different now. The kind of look you get from keeping too many secrets for too long. "I haven't talked about this in public before," she said, looking down at her hands folded together. "Not in 20 years. Not once." The whole courtroom leaned in closer. "I met Sean Combs in 1999, she started. "I was 18, just a kid trying to get people to take me seriously in a world where nobody ever took me seriously." She laughed once, but it sounded bitter. "He was already huge. Puff Daddy. The shiny suits, the music videos, the hit records. Every model, every big shot, every rapper wanted to be around him, including me." She told them exactly what happened at their first meeting. It was at Justin's restaurant in Manhattan, a soul food place in Chelsea that's closed now. He walked in like he owned the place because he did. Everyone either froze or tried to act normal. I remember thinking, he's like the center of everything. Everything spins around him. She met him through a friend, an agent whose name she wouldn't say. Diddy looked me up and down once. Not in a creepy way, just like he was checking me out to see what I could do for him. He told me I had a face that makes money. I thought he really saw me, she said, stopping for a moment. Turns out he saw something else. She talked about going to his recording studio in the middle of the city. Daddy's house recording studio. It was perfect. Crystal light fixtures, walls covered in red velvet, expensive champagne bottles on glass tables. You couldn't tell if it was a music studio or some rich guy's private club. "It was there," she said, "that I first noticed something weird. There were cameras everywhere, but not security cameras, little tiny ones hidden in corners, tucked into smoke detectors. I remember asking someone, I won't say who, and he said, 'It's just for the vibe. Diddy records everything. It's part of the art.'" She let that hang in the air. At the time, I brushed it off. I mean, I was just a reality TV girl trying to break into the real music business. Who was I to question how he did things? Her voice got softer. "He told me, 'You're different, Paris. You're not like them.'" A pause. "He always knew exactly what to say to make you feel like you were special. Then came Flavor Camp. I don't even know where to start," she said, rubbing her head. That's what he called it. Flavor Camp, like some sick joke. He said it was a place to grow talent. But it wasn't about music. Not really. She told them about the first weekend she was invited. There was this huge house outside Atlanta. Long driveway, fountains in front. I remember thinking it looked like a French palace dropped in Georgia. Inside it was marble floors and thick black curtains. Candles everywhere, not the nice-smelling kind, real candles. Big thick ones covered in wax like something from a church. She stopped and looked up. Her eyes moved toward Diddy. He didn't look back at her. The party started late, midnight usually. You couldn't bring your phone. Everyone had to sign something at the door. It wasn't just a paper saying you wouldn't talk. It had weird stuff about agreeing to artistic performances, whatever that meant. It felt normal at the time. It wasn't. She paused. There was this hallway. Red carpet, fancy ropes, doors that locked from the outside. I walked past one that was cracked open and her voice broke. I won't tell you everything I saw. People wearing masks. Not Halloween masks, like ceremony masks. Animal faces, long noses. There were rooms where the music was loud enough to cover up anything. The smell of champagne mixed with something else. Sweat. Something burned. I should have left, she whispered the last part. I should have left. The judge called for a short break. Paris stayed in her chair. When court started again, she opened up a piece of paper. This is from my diary, March 11, 2001. She read, Flavor Camp is not what I thought. Diddy offered me a deal. He said I'd get my own perfume business and stores to sell it if I stayed for the rest of the week. Said I had to see how the real game works. Said, this is how we do it. You either learn or you lose. He wasn't kidding. The room was totally still. I stayed because I thought I could handle it. Because I thought I was in control. But I wasn't. Nobody was. She looked at Diddy again. This time their eyes met for just a second. You told me, this isn't the Hilton Hotel, baby. This is Bad Boy. One. And I laughed, but it wasn't funny. People in the courtroom started whispering. The judge told everyone to be quiet. Paris kept going, her voice stronger now. He flew me to the Bahamas once, a house on an island. I thought it was a vacation, but there were no other women there. Just assistants, security guys, one other artist I won't name. That's when I realized I wasn't there for fun. I was there to be looked at, or used. She didn't cry, but her voice started shaking. I signed a contract that week, some weird business deal. The rules were crazy. Rights to use my face at private parties, money tied to personal appearances. I didn't understand any of it. I was 20. She looked back at her papers, flipping a page. I tried to get out 6 months later. Told him I wanted to cut ties, he said. And I'm quoting exactly. You think this is a fashion show you can just walk away from? You signed up, you walk, you don't work again. Her breathing got faster. The room held its breath again. I believed him. She closed her eyes for a moment. I shouldn't have, but I did. The lawyer came up to her. Ms. Hilton, they asked nicely, why are you speaking out now? She looked across the room, past the jury, into nothing. Because I watched other people disappear. I watched girls leave those parties and never come back the same. I kept quiet because I was scared, and I thought maybe if I kept it buried, it wouldn't eat me up from the inside. And then she turned toward Diddy again. But I see you now, and I want you to see me. Not the blonde girl, not the doll, not the brand. Me. The girl you thought wouldn't remember. She leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. I remember everything. That line just hung in the air like the last note of a sad song. Nobody dared to move. Paris Hilton didn't blink, didn't look away. And for a moment, even Sean Combs stopped tapping his pen. She leaned back in the witness chair and breathed out slowly. I remember exactly how soft the sheets were at that apartment you kept on 55th Street. The one with mirrors on the ceiling in the guest room. I remember the smell in the hallway. Some fancy candle always burning, even at 2 in the morning. I remember the sound of the elevator locking from the inside. She looked right at the jury. These aren't fuzzy memories. This isn't some confused trauma flashback. These are facts, dates, places, and I've kept track of all of them. The lawyer came up to her again, gently. Ms. Hilton, you mentioned papers. Are you ready to share those with the court? Paris nodded and reached into a thin leather folder very carefully. She pulled out a bunch of printed emails, diary pages, and contract papers, each one in its own plastic sleeve. "This," she said, holding up one paper, "is an email from Diddy's personal assistant, dated October 18, 2002. She read, "Following Mr. Combs' orders, you are confirmed for the Barbados trip. Room arrangements will be taken care of on site. Please note, photography is not allowed. You will get more materials to look at once you're on the plane. As always, keep this private." Attached, she said, her voice getting sharper, was a paper called Performance Consent Acknowledgement. I was told it was for a business appearance, but it had language about giving up rights to audio and video of me during private sessions. "That's not normal business stuff." She slid the paper onto the evidence table. "Here's another one," she continued. "My handwritten diary entry from that weekend. November 2nd, 2002. She didn't read it all, just one line. He had 3 phones. One was never used in front of us. That's the one they said was only for recording." A quiet gasp went through the courtroom. Paris didn't acknowledge it. "Do you remember saying to me, Diddy?" she asked without looking at him. "Don't worry, nobody will believe a Hilton if it comes to that." "Because I do." She turned the page. "This is a copy of a payment I never got, $125,000. It was promised for a business appearance at a club opening in Vegas, but the check never went through. When I asked why, your team said, 'You don't get paid to be family.' Family. That's what you called it." She took a shaky breath. "It was never family." She flipped another page. "This is a photo I took in 2003. It's the only one I ever kept from Flavor Camp. I blurred the other people, burned some others. This one shows the masks. I blurred the faces but left the masks." She handed the picture to the court clerk. "Tell me this is normal," gasps again. One jury member covered their mouth. "After that night in the Bahamas, I stopped answering his calls. I moved to the other side of LA. I changed my phone number. And still I got messages." She said one from memory. "Hope you're not getting brave. You're not built for the fall. Call me back." Her hands shook as she put the papers down. "The system protected him," she said. "Managers, agents, executives. They'd whisper behind his back but laugh at his jokes to his face. I remember one exec saying, 'He's too big to fail. Just keep your head down.' And I did. For years, I kept my head down." The lawyer gave her a moment to breathe. Paris held her water glass but didn't drink. "Why now?" the attorney asked again. "Why choose to testify in this case?" Paris looked toward the crowd in the back. Her voice was quieter now. "Because I found her diary. A girl named Laya. That wasn't her real name, but it's what she called herself in the pages. She was 19, a backup dancer on one of his music video tours. She disappeared in 2005. The courtroom shifted. She wrote about Flavor Camp, about the masks, about a night in the Caribbean, and her last entry said, 'They said I was next.' That's when I knew I had to run. But she didn't run. She just disappeared. I kept that diary for 10 years, afraid to admit I had it. But now it's part of this." Paris wiped under her eye quickly. No tears, just pressure. "And I need to say something else about how he kept us quiet." Her tone changed, tougher, filled with anger. "He didn't just use money. He used access. That's how he controlled everything. Want a collab with Marcy? Better play nice. Want your master recordings? Better stay quiet. Want that endorsement deal? Better be loyal. And if you weren't," she turned fully toward Diddy now. "You said it to my face. You don't get cut out, you get cut down." One of the jury members gasped out loud. The judge didn't stop it. I watched it happen to others. Girls who spoke too loudly, guys who said no at the wrong time. One got kicked off a record deal 2 weeks after asking questions. Another was dropped from a tour in the middle. And one girl, she had to check into a hospital. No one ever saw her again. She looked down at the table, voice getting softer again. And I thought maybe if I just played the part long enough, smiled enough, agreed enough, maybe I'd stay safe. Paris closed the folder and folded her hands again. But you never feel safe when your silence is what keeps you alive. The lawyer leaned forward slightly. Did you ever confront Mr. Combs directly? Paris nodded once, slowly. Yes, once, in 2006, at a hotel in Miami, the City. I showed up without being invited. I told him I wanted out, that I wanted the videos erased, that I wouldn't talk. I just wanted to be done. She stared straight ahead, her jaw tight. He laughed. Not a big laugh, just a short, dry one. Then he said, "You think this is some club you can cancel your membership to? You don't cancel. You just stop being useful." A pause. That's when I knew I'd never be free until I told the truth. She looked up, her voice shaking just once more. And I'm not the only one. There are others, still scared, still under his shadow. Some of them are sitting in this room. The entire courtroom felt like it leaned toward her. I kept my mouth shut for so long because I thought it was my fault, that I walked into it, that I let it happen. But that's what he wanted me to believe. That we were part of it, that we chose it. She breathed in slowly. I didn't choose this, and neither did they. A long silence stretched out. The judge didn't try to end it. Paris gathered the remaining papers. I'm giving these to the court, she said. Diary scans, email chains, photos, and one contract with rules so bad it should have been illegal. She passed them to the clerk. And I know this is only the beginning, but it has to begin somewhere, and it begins with truth. Her eyes once again locked onto Sean Combs. You made a lot of people believe they owed you everything. But I owe you nothing. The courtroom didn't breathe. Not for seconds. Not until Paris moved in her seat, like that single movement gave the entire room permission to exist again. Her words didn't echo. They stayed, hung in the air like smoke, thick and choking. And she wasn't done. She put her hand flat on the folder, now closed in front of her like she was holding herself steady. I didn't come here just to tell old stories or wave around old contracts. This isn't nostalgia. This isn't some memoir moment. Her voice got sharper. This is about what finally broke me. About what turned silence into something I couldn't live with anymore. The judge nodded for her to continue. Paris's fingers curled slightly. It was February 2007, Grammy weekend. Everyone was in LA. That Saturday, Diddy was throwing one of his legendary secret parties. Not the kind with fancy ropes and camera. Cruise. The other kind. She leaned forward. There's a mansion off Mulholland Drive. Not the Beverly Hills house everyone knows about. The other one. Set back off Coldwater Canyon. No street lights, no neighbors, no noise complaints. A few jury members shifted. It was supposed to be a private get-together. Just 15, maybe 20 people. A-list. I was told there'd be a deal to discuss. Brand expansion, selling through Bad Boy's luxury business. I'd been working on a perfume line. I wanted to repackage. This was business. Her hands got tighter in her lap. But it wasn't. She took a breath. The moment I walked in, I knew something was wrong. The lights were dim. Too dim. Music playing, but not from anywhere you could see. Surround sound you couldn't trace. Thick curtains, no windows open. And that smell. Something flowery but rotten underneath. Jasmine and sweat. She paused, her jaw working silently for a moment. Everyone had masks again. Gold ones this time. Fancy. Theatrical. Like from Venice. I remember someone handing me one and saying, "It's just part of the energy. Go with it." Paris looked down, then up, like she was daring herself to finish. I wore it. There was rustling behind her, quiet movement in the crowd, but Paris didn't turn. They led us through 3 rooms, each one stranger than the last. First room, white curtains and candles on the floor. Second room, completely dark except for a blue light flashing slowly. People were talking quietly, laughing softly, but no one made eye contact. She breathed out. The third room had walls covered in mirrors, floor to ceiling. There was a couch in the middle, circular, single camera mounted above. Not hidden, proud. I asked, "What is this?" And Diddy said. She paused. The court reporter moved his pen. Paris looked directly at him. "You said, 'This is where the stars are born. Take a seat.'" Her voice broke slightly at the end. And I realized then, this wasn't an opportunity. It was a test, a performance, and I wasn't the star. I was the content. She covered her mouth with one hand, got herself together, then continued. "I tried to leave, said I had another event. You blocked the door. You didn't yell. You smiled. You said, 'You leave now, the deal dies. We were about to change your life.' And I knew that meant something else entirely." She closed her eyes. "You said, 'Don't embarrass me in front of my people.' And I remember thinking, he doesn't mean executives. He means handlers, enforcers, watchers." Another beat. That's when I felt the shift, like I wasn't a person anymore. I was a product with a mouth that needed managing. Her voice was tight now, controlled. "I got out because someone else distracted you. Another guest, a man who saw the look on my face and said loudly, 'Paris, we've got that other meeting, remember?' I still don't know who he was, but I ran. I got in my car, drove to Malibu, and stayed with someone for 2 days. I didn't answer my phone. I didn't go to the Grammys." She looked around the courtroom. "That was the night the mask slipped. When I saw it, not the glamour, not the empire, the control, the manipulation, the rot underneath the glitz." Her voice softened. "After that night, I shut down. I canceled press tours. I told people I was sick. And maybe I was sick from pretending it was all okay. From pretending I didn't see." She looked toward the jury now, holding their gaze. "For 6 months after that, I had panic attacks every time I smelled jasmine. I couldn't wear the perfume I'd created. Couldn't step inside a mirrored room. I deleted voicemails without listening. I kept moving, always with people, never alone, because alone was where the thoughts came." Her hands shook now, but she didn't stop. By late 2008, I was in therapy, diagnosed with PTSD. I told my therapist I had dreams of locked doors and masked faces. I couldn't explain them, not without admitting too much. So I said I was overworked, tired, overexposed. That was easier than saying the truth. A pause. I've spent years retraining my brain not to jump at camera flashes. Years trying not to blame myself for the rooms I walked into. Because I wasn't looking for trouble. I was looking for approval, for a path, for someone who said, "I see you." But what you saw, Diddy, was leverage. She turned toward him again. He was still unreadable. "You used every ambition we had as a leash. You offered dreams wrapped in fine print. We signed, we smiled, we suffered." Paris looked down again. "And we weren't the only ones." She shifted forward, eyes narrowing slightly. "I remember a young singer, 17, gorgeous voice, bright. She left one of your sessions in tears. Never released a single track again. Disappeared from the business within months. I tried to reach out. Her number was disconnected. A friend said she was relocating for her health." Another pause. "She never came back." Her fingers dug into the edge of the table. "I remember a driver too. Kind man, quiet. He once whispered, 'If these walls talked, they'd burn down the label.' I never saw him again after that." A jury member wiped their eye. Another scribbled frantically. The point is, everyone saw something. But we all told ourselves the same thing. Don't look too hard, don't listen too close, don't get in the way. Because if you did, you vanished. She took a final breath for this part. Well, I looked, I listened, and I'm still here. Her gaze swept the room, landing once more on Diddy. And now you have to listen, because the silence is done. It hit like thunder. No one moved. Not the jury. Not the press scribbling with shaking fingers. Not even the defendant, Sean Combs, whose smirk had long since drained into something colder, heavier. Paris Hilton didn't sit back this time. She stayed forward. The moment wasn't over. Not yet. There's something you learn when you've been silenced long enough, she said, her voice still even but darker now, weightier. Eventually you stop being afraid of what happens when you speak, because the cost of not speaking becomes unbearable. She turned her head slowly, looking around the courtroom. I'm not the only one who paid that cost. The lawyer nodded toward her. You've mentioned others, Ms. Hilton. Would you be willing to tell us more? Paris's eyes closed, then opened. She nodded once. There was a boy named Elijah. No stage name. Just Elijah. He was 19 when Diddy signed him to a development deal in 2004. He had this raw talent, like Lenny Kravitz meets Frank Ocean. I saw him at Daddy's house once, just killing it on a chorus for a track with Carl Thomas. I asked him if he had management. Yet, he smiled, said Diddy was personally investing in him. A pause. A month later, he was gone. The courtroom stirred. Paris pressed on. I asked around. One of the interns told me he broke down after a trip to Turks and Caicos. Started talking about things he wasn't supposed to talk about. Studio people stopped answering his calls. His tracks never dropped. His name vanished. She looked down at her lap. I found his SoundCloud last year. 3 songs, all posted in 2014. The last one's called Ghost Advance. He sings, I signed the dream, now I sleep in chains. That line wrecked me. A beat. He never made it. Paris breathed in, gathering herself. There's a pattern here, she continued. It's not just about parties or masks or contracts with traps buried in them. It's about power and the way it warps everyone around it. She looked toward the crowd now, and the people in it. The industry figures, the former assistants, the retired security guards, the makeup artists, the stylists. People who had passed through the orbit of bad boy like comets around a black hole. I see some of you. I recognize you. You were there. You saw what I saw. Maybe not the worst of it. Maybe you looked away before you had to choose. But you knew. And still you stayed quiet. Her voice softened. I don't blame you. She waited. I did the same. There was a long silence before she continued. I spent years convincing myself it was too late, that no one would believe me, that I had played along too long to claim innocence, that I was too famous to be taken seriously, too branded to be believed. She looked again toward Diddy. You built an empire on that silence, on the fear, on the NDAs, on the unspoken rules of loyalty that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with leverage. Then quieter, but more cutting. You told me, once, you're either with me or you're nobody. I believed that. She leaned forward. But I'm not nobody, and I'm not with you. Paris took a small object from her folder, a flash drive. She held it up. This contains audio files, conversations I recorded with other survivors. Some chose not to testify. They're afraid. Some of them are still under contract. But they gave me permission to submit these because they want their voices in this room, even if they can't be. She passed the drive to the clerk. Their words will haunt you more than mine ever could. Paris sat back now, but only slightly. Her body remained tight, alert, like she expected resistance. But none came. No interruptions. Not from Diddy's team. not from the court. A final question came, soft but certain, from the prosecutor. Is there anything else you'd like to say before you step down? She didn't answer immediately. She looked again toward the jury, then the judge, then finally Diddy. Her voice dropped to a hush. There are girls who didn't survive. Not because they died, but because they stopped living. Girls who left the industry, who left themselves, who've been looking in mirrors for 20 years trying to find the person they were before they met you. She paused. I'm doing this for them. A single tear slipped down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. This isn't just about you. It's about all of it. The labels, the handlers, the press who turned whispers into jokes, the fans who ignored the signs, the assistants who looked the other way, the bodyguards who kept their backs turned, the entire machine. Her voice gathered strength. This story doesn't end with you in handcuffs or in exile or in another mansion pretending none of this ever touched you. It ends with us telling the truth out loud, in public, without fear. And finally, she stood, slowly, straightened. Her blazer took one last breath. Your power came from our silence, so this is where it dies. She walked past the witness stand, past the lawyers' tables, past Diddy. She didn't look at him, not this time, because she didn't need to. The room didn't erupt, it didn't cheer. It simply stood still the way a building does after a huge earthquake. Shaken, cracked, but still standing. Something had changed. Paris Hilton exited the courtroom to no applause. Just the quiet realization in every corner of that space that the silence was finally broken. Outside, cameras waited. They always had. But for once, she didn't smile for them. She didn't pose. She stepped up to the microphone, looked out over the crowd, and said one line, "You know my name. Now you know my truth." And then she turned and left. No makeup touch-up, no rehearsed statement. Just a woman who had waited decades to be believed, finally stepping into daylight. Inside the courthouse, the ripple had already begun. A court worker made a call. A junior producer took notes. An ex-stylist whispered to a journalist. And somewhere, in another city, a former artist watched the live stream on a cracked phone and whispered to no one. She did it. More would come. And this time, they wouldn't be silent.